Fala prevencionista, tudo bem? Eu sou o Nestor, do site de Segurança e Trabalho NWN, e hoje estou aqui, porque nós acabamos de traduzir, eu acabei de traduzir, até claro, a tradução não é toda minha, eu peguei e pesquisei bastante a tradução, consegui encontrar e estou compartilhando aqui com vocês a tradução de um vídeo muito interessante que é A Psicologia da Automotivação. E é muito especial essa palestra porque é uma das palestras do TED. Se você sabe, o TED tem vários palestrantes que são chamados, são convidados para palestrar lá para eles. Só gente de altíssimo nível. E, além disso, a palestra é dada pelo Scott Geller, que é um cara que entende muito da área de comportamento. Ele é um especialista, um dos maiores especialistas do mundo da área de comportamento. Então, a palestra ficou show. Eu tenho certeza que você vai gostar. Então, se você já está acessando aqui mesmo, aproveita e já se inscreve no nosso canal, porque, vez por outra, a gente quer fazer isso com maior regularidade, trazer feras, conteúdos de primeira qualidade que estão em inglês, traduzir para o português e trazer para vocês. Então, senhoras e senhores, sem mais delongas, com vocês, Scott Geller. Fui.
Thank you. Thank you. Beyond boundaries. What a theme, huh? Beyond. Now, when I think of boundaries, I think of rules, regulations, and restrictions. And I think of the parents and the teachers and the supervisors who hold us accountable with regard to those boundaries. Now, that's not a bad thing. I know if you're like me, I need supervisors. I need someone holding me accountable to do the right thing. But beyond boundaries is something different. I think of those leaders, those teachers, those supervisors, those parents who inspire us to go beyond the call of duty, to do more than we have to do it not because they tell us, but because we want to. I would like to share with you what the research says about how to make that happen. And not just for other people, but for yourself. Here's the deal. How can we inspire people and ourselves to be self-motivated? There's another word. It's called empowerment. You've heard that word, right? Now, the management definition of empowerment is get her done. Just get her done with fewer resources and less time. I empower you. Make it happen. I'm talking about feeling empowered. That's different. Feeling empowered is when you're self-motivated. Now, if you want to know if you feel empowered or if your child, your student, your worker feels empowered, ask them 3 questions. And if they say yes to these 3 questions, they will feel empowered. And by the way, this is not based on common sense, it's based on research. But you've all been there, so it'll feel like common sense. Question number 1, can you do it? Albert Bandura calls it self-efficacy. Do you believe you can do it? Do you have the time, the knowledge, and the training to do what we're asking you to do? If you answer yes, good. Second question, will it work? Do you believe that we're asking you to do the process will work? Albert Bandura calls that response efficacy, believing that the behavior will lead to the ultimate outcome. By the way, that takes education, right? We have to show them the data. We might show them some theory. We show them, teach them why this might work. I just used the word education. Earlier, I used the word training. Is there a difference? In elementary school, we call it education. Middle school, education. High school, education. College, higher education. Then you go to industry. What do you call it? Training. You have your training department. There must be a difference. Well, you know the difference. Do you want your kids to have sex education or sex training? And your kids might answer the question differently. Because you know that training means you do the behavior and you get feedback. That's powerful. Powerful. Have you ever heard this word, online training? It's an oxymoron, isn't it? I mean, training is watch the behavior. Online training, it's like plastic silverware, jumbo shrimp, legal brief, country music. I mean, it doesn't work. Okay, so if you answer yes to it will work, third question, is it worth it? So we've had a training question, we've had an educational question, this is the motivational question. Do you believe the consequences? This is about consequences. B.F. Skinner taught us this, selection by consequences. Dale Carnegie quoted B.F. Skinner and said, from the day you were born, everything you did was because you wanted something for doing it. Consequences. Is it worth it? So you have to convince people that it's worth it. Now, by the way, if you answer yes to those three questions, you feel competent. Am I right? You feel competent at doing worthwhile work. You've all been there. When you feel competent at doing worthwhile work, you're more likely to be self-motivated. You've been there. No one has to be looking over you. You feel, now here's the challenge, leaders, teachers. How do you inspire people to feel competent? Well, you give them feedback. You give them recognition. You show them they are competent. Okay, I got one more, another C word. Choice. Your common sense will tell you. When you believe you have a sense of autonomy, a sense of choice in what you're doing, you feel more self-motivated. B.F. Skinner taught us that too. In his book, Beyond Freedom and Dignity, way back in 1971, reading that book changed my life because I realized that I am controlled by consequences. But sometimes I don't feel controlled. When I'm working for a pleasant consequence, it feels good. It feels like I'm working to get something. When I'm working to avoid an aversive consequence, I feel controlled. That's called negative reinforcement. So here's a challenge, leaders. How do we get people to become success seekers rather than failure avoiders? First day of introductory psychology class. I teach 2 classes of 600 students. Maybe some of you have been in that class. And remember, the first day I say, how many are here to avoid failure? And 80% raise their hand. And I say, well, thanks for coming. I know you're motivated, but you're not happy campers. You probably told your friends, I got to go to class. It's a requirement. Not I get to go to class. It's an opportunity. You probably woke up to an alarm clock, not an opportunity clock. And it's all in how you see it. Really, it's all in how you see it. It's your paradigm. It's how you communicate to others and how you communicate to yourself. So Ellen Langer said in her book, Mindfulness, she said, and psychologists know, when you perceive choice, you perceive motivation. You're more motivated. So the deal is, for yourself, sit back and reflect. Be mindful of the choices you have. And talk about being a success seeker rather than a failure avoider. It's all how you talk, how you communicate to yourself and to others. I've got a 4th C word, community. Powerful word. Psychologists know that social support is critical. People who perceive a sense of relatedness, a sense of connection with other people, they feel motivated and they're happier. I want to recite a poem. It's called The Cookie Thief by Valerie Cox. And as I recite this poem, there's only 2 characters, a man and a lady. Put yourself in the situation. Be mindful. Think about the situation and what you would do. Okay, here we go. A woman was waiting in an airport one night with several hours before her flight. She hunted for a book in an airport shop, bought a bag of cookies, and found a place to drop. She was engrossed in her book and happened to see that the man beside her, as bold as could be, took a cookie or 2 from the bag between, which she tried to ignore to avoid a scene. She read, munched cookies, and watched the clock as the gutsy cookie thief diminished her stock. She was getting more irritated as the minutes ticked by, thinking if I wasn't so nice, I'd blacken his eye. With each cookie she took, he took one too. When only one was left, she wondered what he'd do. With a smile on his face and a nervous laugh, he took the last cookie and he broke it in half. He offered her half as he ate the other. She snatched it from him and thought, oh, brother, this guy has some nerve, and he's also rude. He didn't even show any gratitude. She had never known when she'd been so galled, and she sighed with relief when her flight was called. She gathered her belongings and headed for the gate, refusing to look back at the thieving ingrate. She boarded the plane and sank on her seat. Then she sought her book, which was almost complete. As she reached in her baggage, she gasped with surprise. There was her bag of cookies in front of her eyes. If mine are here, she moaned in despair. Then the others were his, and he tried to share. Too late to apologize, she realized with grief that she was the rude one, the ingrate, the thief. So where were you where were you? Whose side were you on? Were you thinking independent or interdependent? I don't blame you if you think independent. You know, that's how we're raised. Nice guys finish last. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. Got to blow your own horn. You know, independent. We come into this life of ours dependent to others, and then we can't wait to become teenagers. You know, we're too old to do what kids do, too young to do what adults do, so then we'll do what nobody else would do to assert our independence. And some of us get stuck there. We're stuck. I'll do it myself. I don't need you. Not good. We need each other. We have to have each other's back. We need a sense of community. This independence culture that we got to move to interdependent. Okay, 4 C words that can fuel self-motivation and I think can fuel actively caring for people. Let me tell you a story to put it all together. It happened over 60 years ago. I remember it like yesterday. My parents asked me, hey, Scott, how'd you like to get drum lessons? How'd you like to play the drums? Oh, man, would I ever? I'm thinking of Buddy Rich and Gene Krupa. Most of you guys don't know those names, but they were the drummers. In those days, the drum was in the front of the band. They had white pearl drum sets, and I saw myself. That was my vision. I had a vision, consequences, that was my vision. And I said, yeah, I want to take drum lessons. So the teacher would bring his drum and set it next to mine. I didn't have a nice drum like this. My parents bought me a beat-up old drum at an auction. And they said to me, if you get better, if your teacher tells us you're getting, they're holding me accountable. Teacher says you're getting better, we'll get you a better snare drum and then a bass drum and then some cymbals. And that was my vision, and that kept me going. Consequences. So the teacher would come in and he would show me stuff. You know, this is how left hand, this is how Buddy Rich plays with his left hand and his right hand. And they would just do things like a flam. Can you hear that in the back? You okay? And this is a rim shot. He would show me stuff. I was just 10 years old, remember? And when he showed me stuff, I felt, wow. He showed me this little simple drum beat. Watch me, Scott. Watch this. And I practiced it, and I did it. I'm feeling competent. He showed me a paradiddle. Listen, paradiddle, paradiddle. And he said, you go home when you practice next week, I want to see your paradiddle. And I said, watch this. And I'd say, watch this. He said, that's a double paradiddle. Hey, we didn't get there yet. I'm reading ahead. Because I'm self-motivated. I feel competent. I'm walking through Muhlenberg High School, Allentown, Pennsylvania, and I see the music teacher, and he says, I hear you're learning to play the drums. I said, yeah, and I'm getting good. He said, you can march in the band. You can be the snare drummer. Whoa, that felt good. Another vision. Then the teacher comes into my, these were private lessons, by the way, $2. $2, that was a long time ago. She said, Scott, you ready to do a drum roll? I said, of course, I'm ready for a drum roll. He says, watch, Scott, here you go, watch this. Would you do that again? Scott, this is easy. Watch me. Now you practice that, and next week, I want to see a drum roll. He comes back the next week, he says, how's your drum? I can do a paradiddle. That's regression. I want to see a drum roll. Week after week, now we're talking about distress. Now we're talking about apathy. Now we're talking about learned helplessness. That's what psychologists call it. I remember walking through that elementary school and seeing a music teacher, and he said, so Scott, how you doing? How are the drums? Not so good. I can't do a drum roll. You know, like adults always say, never say can't. You can be anything you want to be, Scott. No, I can't do a drum roll. I've tried and I tried, and I've kind of given up. And he said, Scott, when you ever get overwhelmed, break it down. Break it down. Can you do a paradiddle? Yeah. Okay, what's the second beat? 2 beats. Yeah, well, that's a drum roll, Geller. It's 2 beats. You go home and you practice and you say, Dada Mama. Remember, I was just 10. You go, Dada Mama, Dada Mama, Dada Mama, Dada. It's a drum roll. That teacher came back the next week. Okay, Scott, I guess you can't do a drum roll. I said, watch this. He said, whoa, how'd you learn to do that? And I showed my teacher. I taught my teacher, 10 years old. He said, I had forgotten that I got into the habit of just doing this and forgot that it's 2 beats. You taught me how to teach the drum roll, Scott. There's a lesson there. We can always learn from each other. We need to have the humility to accept feedback and the courage to speak up. And we need to help each other feel self-motivated. How? Give them the perception of competence. Teach them about consequences drive us. You know, let them perceive choice, and let them know it's community. We're all in this together, and we need each other. Thank you.